If there's one thing that only games can do better than any other medium, it's their allowance for participation. Whereas film, television, music and writing are passively engaged with after inception, either through critical analysis or fan labour, games are very much an active medium, one where the players are very much as important to the experience as the product itself. Even at their simplest levels, video games are informed by player participation. In linear, story-driven games like Uncharted or Metal Gear Solid, the game places you in the moment-to-moment action, where you have direct effect over the main protagonist's actions and hold responsibility for shepherding them to the next plot point. To move up a level, role-playing games and emergent sims allow you to more fully occupy a character, informing their decisions and how they engage with the world around them, affecting their moral compass and their held beliefs, where life and death is only a small quandary in the character's moment-to-moment gameplay. At their highest level, you have creative toolkits. Games like Minecraft, Little Big Planet, and Cabal Space Program are driven by player-created content, to the point that their experience is entirely down to how much the audience puts into it, making them game developers in their own right. In my opinion, the more control a game allows a player, the more respect they show for their involvement, while still providing a solid framework for this expression. Even in simple arcade games, giving players everything they need to self-prescribe challenges is perhaps the most distilled form of this mantra. Much has been said about the 24-character word that all video game analysis eventually drop, and while not the ultimate bogeyman in games writing, it does explain the fracture in some games of allowing players a platform for expression, only for the developer, either through narrative or presentation, to tell them that their actions are incorrect. For me, the best games are the ones that find a comfortable middle ground between simulation and toolkit, where you can inhibit a creative force in a fully realised world, and where problem solving is entirely down to a few simple pieces and what you do with them, placing you in the role of a storyteller. It's been good to see that some of the most talked about games this year fully embrace the player as a storyteller. Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has reinvented the storied franchise for a new generation of players, and has recaptured the essence of the enigmatic original, but by using a systems-driven world, it's created the opportunity for everyone to have their very own Zelda story to tell. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds lets players be part of a 100-man skirmish for supremacy, where a large open world, limited resources and focus on short-term survival has created a video-friendly phenomenon that has captured the imaginations of players worldwide. This isn't to mention the rise of audience participation and online streaming, the prevalent community of modders and machinima makers producing game engine entertainment, not to mention the continuing rise and relevance of esports. There's been a number of titles over the years that I've engaged with, and the ones that have made the most impact on me all follow a trend of having them be natural extensions of their design, where the developers have honed their gameplay to such a point that the audience can be involved in the creation process. Whether it was building creative lines in Tony Hawk's Skate Park Builder, trying to compose multi-layered arenas or fun mini-games in Halo's Forge mode, building with 1 billion digital bricks in Minecraft, or channeling my inner Miyamoto in Super Mario Maker, a title that makes building levels just as fun as playing them. But if there's one game in particular that I think nailed this aspect the most, and one that I think deserves to be celebrated as a groundbreaking game in its own right, well, I'm GAMESD, and yes, I'm completely serious. This is why Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts works. To the 3 people who are still watching this video, thank you for sticking past that bombshell. To anyone writing any obvious comments below, let me address the elephant in the room. To say that Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was a game that people weren't expecting would be something of an understatement. Since the release of Banjo-Tooie on the Nintendo 64, there has been an expectation for Rare that the series would return for a third outing much in the style of these previous games. Open world, multiple objective sandboxes, with a focus on light platforming, blended gameplay, and collectible tokens. Highly regarded as some of the Nintendo 64's finest games, they were also some of the last titles produced during Rare's much celebrated partnership with Nintendo that started with Donkey Kong Country. After becoming a development partner for Microsoft and focused on their Xbox line of consoles, Rare released a string of games that, while showing the creative spirit the team was known for, failed to resonate with any long-time fans. When Banjo-Kazooie were revealed to be making a return on the Xbox 360, anticipation was at an all-time high. The potential of this open-ended gameplay on the power of the current hardware. Instead, the series had taken a new direction. To many people who had grown up with fond memories of the franchise, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was seen as too much of a radical departure from a genre that, at the time, hadn't had a game like the original Banjo-Kazooie in some time, with Mario having made the leap to more linear and focused level design, and Donkey Kong returned to his SNES roots. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts did well with game journalists at the time, and sold enough copies to meet platinum hit status on the Xbox 360, though the reaction amongst fans was mixed. The main criticism of the title at the time was that Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was not Banjo-Kazooie free, or Banjo-free. Playing the game then, and having played the game since, I absolutely agree with the sentiment. The characters and setting remain the same, music makes a return reorchestrated, presentation has received an upgrade that both improves upon and playfully recaptures the chunky square aesthetic of the N64 game, but from a fundamental gameplay level, and your main mode of interface with the game, Nuts and Bolts is not Banjo-free. Fortunately, it's something so much better. To the one person left watching this video, glad to have you along for the ride. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts might not be Banjo-free as we expected it, but the DNA of the series is not only present in the game, but remains very much unchanged from the N64 originals, just not in the way you might expect. The original Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie put a lot of creativity behind its objective design. Whether it was feeding a totem pole with eggs, collecting Christmas presents for polar bear cubs, or playing a piano with a disembodied hand, the game managed to make target practice, token collection, or a basic memory puzzle more interesting through the context of its world. For most of these tasks, however, you aren't asked to use more than a single-use ability. Shooting eggs, pounding the ground for keys, or just finding presents in the environment. Tooie would make tasks contextually more interesting through objectives that went through multiple levels, or required multiple characters, or transformations, or special moves from later levels. But mechanically, they were all much more simplified, with tasks that were convoluted uses of single-use gimmicks, or just asked you to engage in minigames that recontextualise the controls. It's understandable that the games would be so fondly remembered by so many. After all, I'm a big fan of them too, and while revisiting them did expose some of the shortcomings of their actual participation, their presentation still did a lot to make the games more engaging. But here's the thing, the focus on solving problems with special abilities in creative situations, that's Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. And the best thing is, you get to decide how to solve the problems. Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts' main mode of gameplay revolves around the use of building and using utility vehicles, and much like the Banjo games of old, you can outfit them with the right equipment for the job. Feeding a totem pole? Put cannons on your vehicle. Need to bring Christmas presents to polar bear cubs? You could build a roadster with plenty of storage space to hold them, or a helicopter with a winch to carry them over. Playing a piano? Well, you could always drop some anchors, or maybe bounce across them with springs. The fun of the game is the fact that there's no right way to solve a problem. You can do it quickly, you can do it well, you can do it with as little parts as possible, or as many, or try and do it while looking as good as possible. While the game is designed to reward players who can achieve goals under strict conditions, generous sharing and blueprint features means that imaginative gameplay can be shared online to inspire creative thinking. To say that Nuts and Bolts isn't a Banjo-Kazooie game would be a disservice. The games have always been about problem solving through special abilities. It's just that now, you can use whichever ones you want, in whatever configuration you want. Well, the game manages to do what Banjo didn't, is making you much more important in the problem solving. You aren't just asked to inhibit a character on an adventure. You're asked to engineer solutions that have to be different from challenge to challenge. In the early game especially, when your cache of parts is small and somewhat simple, you have to think a lot more creatively to come up with vehicles to complete a task. And when you do come away successful, it's far more satisfying than the prescribed solutions of the previous games. I can understand that not everyone enjoys having to build their own fun, but the game does a lot to get every player up to speed. The vehicle editor is incredibly intuitive, and is perhaps one of, if not Rare's greatest achievements. And it's very easy to put a vehicle together quickly. The logic of the world is very simple. As long as your vehicle has fuel, an engine, a seat and something to propel you forward, you're good to go. With a robust physics engine that, like the best Mario games, splits the difference between what we know is right and what feels right for a video game, everything you build will be interesting to use, even if it's incorrect. The amount of options available to outfit your vehicles is staggering, and you can easily design vehicles that can masterfully traverse land, air, sea, or all three, as well as a lot of options for both engagement and interaction. You can build a vehicle to serve a single purpose, or multiple, and even when you're incorrect, you can quickly hop right back into the editor to make modifications. Where many worried that the game would see an over-reliance on racing game hooks, the game challenges you in a lot of interesting ways. Whether it's destroying targets, protecting VIPs, transporting cargo, participating in sports, or boss fights, much like Kazooie and Tooie's gameplay. And by putting solutions in your direct control, you'll feel much more engaged with these activities. Even when the game challenges you to use prescribed vehicles, you can continue to modify them in world, and the developers don't stop you from taking their creations and reworking them to fit your own needs. The game isn't without some issues, however, but these aren't at the expense of it not being a Banjo-Kazooie game. Despite the number of options available to complete tasks, towards the end of the game, you'll very quickly start to gravitate towards the same few super pieces that, without any regulation on the game's behalf, make every activity feel somewhat rote. If it was up to me, I'd build modifiers into challenges that ask users to be more creative with their builds, either do it in a small number of parts, or specific parts only, and reward them accordingly. The game does do this in some occasions, especially in challenges that, after a certain point, you have no control over your vehicle. The game already has a free tiered system of reward, with notes for participation, which can be used in the hub to buy new parts of pre-built chassis, jigsaw pieces that act as your currency to unlock new worlds and new objectives, or trophies for the highest level of play, which act as a quarter of a jigsaw piece. It's not hard to imagine an extra strata reward based on meeting these particular conditions. Despite being a total reinvention of the franchise, the game isn't quite competent enough to shake off elements of its past, though does do so through the lens of this new gameplay. The main hub world, Showdown Town, is perhaps the nearest the game gets to the original structure. Your main trolley vehicle is upgraded after each encounter with the game's antagonist, and like the original Kazooie, each is a utility that allows you to reach more of the map. It says a lot that the first ability you unlock to move to new levels in the original game, the Talon Trot, is reworked here as the high grip wheels that serve the same purpose. It's also where vestigial elements of the original game are still used, with tokens and vehicle pieces hidden in the environment, where you're asked to use your core abilities and your trolley as a platform to start building a library of parts. This element is perhaps the nearest we'll see to what the structure of a Banjo 3 would look like, and does provide a fun additional layer to the main mode of gameplay, though having it does undermine what the game was going for, and really, I could have easily seen how a lot of these elements could have been reworked to fully use the vehicle. Like the originals, there's a lot of character to the world, and the hub itself is perhaps one of Rare's most inviting environments. An industrial coastal town with a friendly English charm, inhabited by quirky personalities and shop vendors. Even side activities make a return from Tooie, whether it's Jingo Bingo, whose tokens you accumulate from completing Jingo minigames in the game worlds, or Klungo's arcade game, a crudely presented single-button platformer game, which could have been a subtle jab at the emerging Xbox Live Arcade platform and the new wave of indie developers, but also speaks to the do-it-yourself nature of the game entirely. Having returning characters fill the roles of both vendors in the hub and actors in these game worlds did a lot to add more personality, and it's good that, though their inclusion is still somewhat problematic, some of the original game's more questionable characters are reworked to move them from their dated origins. It's also good to see new characters that both fit within the Banjo world and within the world of Nuts and Bolts. The worlds themselves are built entirely to support vehicle-based gameplay. They're far larger than anything in the N64 original, though far more barren of platforms and inside areas. There's far fewer levels than the original games, though the amount of objectives that are squeezed out of the same settings are to be commended. And they not only provide interesting settings for your activities, but their themes directly tie into the designs themselves. Whether it's the open arena and sports focus of the Giglossium, the winding corridors of LOGBOX 720, or the landmark Pocked Island and coconut-based activities of Nutty Acres. If there's a few things that could have been taken from the original game, it could be some of the more interesting aspects of its presentation. There could be a few more smaller levels, or even single objective tied levels with more unique themes. While the original game did focus on simple activities to solve problems, there were a few quirky ideas that the Nuts and Bolts engine could fully capitalise on. It's a 3D object builder, so you can have tasks that ask you to build a structure to house a character, or a tool that you could use for an activity. Really, the amount of options available through this powerful development tool has far more applications than you might expect. Finally, the question has to be asked. Nuts and Bolts is a great game, but is it a great Banjo-Kazooie game? On a purely reactionary level, the game's change from an adventure platforming genre to vehicle driving genre is a hard pill to swallow, but once you realise that Nuts and Bolts, like its predecessors, is a problem-solving sandbox game, you get an appreciation for an evolution of its dated formula. You only have to look at this year's Yooka-Laylee, a game produced by ex-Rare staff directly involved with the creation of the original games, but only partially involved with Nuts and Bolts, to see the potential flaws of a third traditional Banjo-Kazooie outing. Levels are as large as some of the Nuts and Bolts environments, but ask you to traverse them with characters ill-equipped for their enormous size. Multiple objective design returns, but again, don't ask you to perform anything more taxing than completing simple minigames or using special abilities in the right context. A lack of structure to its design, or at least in a way that points players in the right direction, make moment-to-moment gameplay frustrating to commit to. Even its collectibles, which were used in the original games to lead players in the right direction, are spread randomly across maps, which wouldn't have been a problem if they weren't used as your main currency for unlocking special abilities. Its main hook, expanding levels or unlocking new ones, doesn't fully work out either, with unnecessary gating between levels that asks you to fully explore levels you might not want to expand. The game is too afraid to improve upon the original formula, and at times comes off condescending to its audience. Whereas Nuts and Bolts was a game that respects your participation, Yooka-Laylee made my involvement feel like a chore. That's not to say that a return to form couldn't work. After all, this year's Super Mario Odyssey sees Mario return to a style of open-world gameplay popularised in Super Mario 64. But having spent time replaying all the titles in the storied franchise, I'm pretty sure that I know that the series is, for now, on the right track. Next year, the game will be 10 years old, and was already 10 years out from the original Banjo-Kazooie when it was released. The potential of this title is as incredible now as it was at release, and Rare and Microsoft should look to returning to Nuts and Bolts as a platform for future games. There are places to improve, but they should stick to what they did so well in this first game. Titles like Minecraft have opened the doors for games to allow player creation as the main mode of gameplay. And some of my favourite games of the past few years have leaned into making player participation a major focus of their design. Nuts and Bolts deserves to be celebrated for its achievement much in the way that the N64 original was. And I'm happy to see that the game is at least getting a second opinion thanks to its inclusion in Rare Replay. The game made the wrong first impression out of the gate for not being Banjo-free, but it's after spending so much time with the game that I realised that Nuts and Bolts is a better Banjo-Kazooie game through and through. One that should inspire developers to look at their own games and ask, how can I put the player first? Hello! Thank you for watching and listening. If you want to support the channel or receive notifications of new videos, remember to press the subscribe button. If you want updates on future videos or want to know a bit more about me, follow me on Twitter. And if you'd like to leave any feedback, please leave a comment below. I try and respond to anything you post. And that's all for now. Talk to you soon.